It is. It sure is. But you know, we're making it work. Trying anyway. Well, it's not new. Yeah, it's definitely good. It's not fully what I expected. I think it was just add the gavel and find some papers, and it's been a little more in depth. I'm interested in all that. Yeah. At this point, I'm not sure. Oh, at this point, I'm not sure what I'm not going to do. I'll be interested to see how that works out. It's always have been in the township. So I moved here in 2011. Okay. So,
No, the problem is that
I'm sure it does. I didn't know before I moved here. That's for sure. But, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting of the Senior and Community Center Task Force to order. This is our December 10th meeting of 2024. Our first item of business is a roll call. I will call the roll. Chair Hendrickson is here. Member Ferris?
Here.
Member Vagnozzi?
Here.
Member Malley? Member Hood? Member Nagasetti?
Here.
Member Robertson? Member Maisner?
Here.
Member Steed?
Here.
All right, and we do have a quorum with a couple of folks absent. And I hear from at least one of our superintendents to say that he really wishes he could be, actually they both really wish they could be here. It's just some illness going around, I think, is keeping folks away. You know, you're around kids a lot. I imagine that's
Right.
that's not
That's
unusual.
okay. That's okay to know.
But I'm sure they would have liked to be here if they could. But the business of the task force will carry on, as it often does. So next on our agenda is public remarks. We've got two opportunities for public remarks this evening, one here at the beginning of the meeting and one at the end. If any members of the public would like to speak at public remarks, I'd ask that you please fill out one of the green cards that's on the table by the door, and you can hand that off to one of our staff and they'll make sure it gets up to us. Public remarks are limited to 3 minutes, and I'll keep a timer up here so we keep ourselves in a neat and orderly fashion. And with that said, we do have one green card here from Gregory Smith. If you want to please join us at the podium. If anyone else would like to, just hand those green cards in to one of our staff around the edge of the room here, and they'll be happy to take those from you.
Hey, my name's Gregory Smith, and I live in Hamilton House condominiums, and I was kind of asked to do this from our Euchre Club. Their choice is for the facility is behind the fire station. They find that the driving range would be hard to get to for some of the people, and the turning would be hard because the Grand River is very busy. So those are the comments.
Thank you.
I just got a question. You want me to come up?
Thank you very much. And Greg, that Euchre Club must have started after I left Hamilton House. I would have definitely been a part if I had known what was going on.
You're welcome back.
All right, I appreciate that. Next up, we have Julie Stouffer.
Hi, I'm Julie Stauffer, 2370 Shawnee Trail, Okemos. And my question is, what happened to the proposal of buying or purchasing the property that's on Grand River that was the golf course, where the senior center would be built separately, and then at a later time, bring in the rest of a community center, and that would be open to pickleball and everything else that the community center wants. But the seniors really would still prefer an individual building for themselves. And so I wondered what happened to that proposal and why I haven't heard any more about them even checking on that. And are they really looking into a separate place for the senior centers? Does it always have to include the community center? It seems like everything has been based on it all being together. I haven't heard too much on having an individual senior center.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to speak? All right. So it's not typically our practice to respond directly to public comments, but this is a more informal setting. So just so you are aware, we are, intending to pursue multiple options for possible locations. One that this task force approved our staff looking into was the Central Fire Station location that Mr. Smith brought up earlier. The second is the driving range property. For the purposes of these meetings, we don't get into like the formal negotiation strategy for any of that, because we'd be negotiating in public here on TV, and whoever's watching could very easily see that, and that's something that, we're not interested in doing. It'd be financially imprudent. But suffice it to say that, those conversations are going on in the background. And it is the operating mission of this body to put forward two plans, one with a standalone senior center and one with a senior and community center for the board to consider next year. And so both of those are moving forward in tandem, and we'll be talking about each of those as we go forward into the next couple of meetings here. I think where you'll start to see the difference is starting tonight and then on into the future, we're going to start to talk a little bit more about the costs associated with both alleys of this plan, of these plans. And you'll see that there is a difference between one and the other. And we'll just have to, bring both of those forward to the board in the spring. So stay tuned. We appreciate you coming, though. Next up on our agenda is item 4, approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Member Vagnozzi. Do we have a second? Seconded by Member Ferris. Any comments on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the approval of our minutes from the November 19th, 2024 meeting. Do we have any motions on the minutes this evening?
So moved.
Moved by Member Steed,
Support.
supported by Member Maisner. Any comments or changes on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion passes. We do have in our packet this evening a number of communications from the public, so we thank you. And if anyone from the public would like to reach out to the task force in the future, you can always send emails to scctaskforce@meridian.mi.us. We certainly welcome all public feedback, both here in the meetings and via email. And those emails that you send to us do find their way into our public packet that we review before each meeting and will be on the public record. So please feel free to reach out to us that way. Next up is our lone agenda/discussion item this evening, which is programming and costs. So we'll turn things over to Interim Township Manager Tim Schmidt.
Thank you. And so, Supervisor Hendrickson pointed out correctly that we are in the process now of starting to pivot towards a more detailed discussion of A versus B, right? And so we had our initial discussion on the site, and I can tell you that we continue to work on that behind the scenes and are planning on having a very formal update on the site at the January meeting. Progressive was at this meeting last month, and they held a separate meeting in this room with the senior community that, and I'll let Director Wazinski speak to the details of that if you have questions, but was very successful, and we've got a good background on the needs assessment, and so they are now working on some conceptual layouts and space planning to bring forward in January to start to finalize the concept moving forward. But ultimately, the fundamental question that the task force was assigned was senior or senior community center. And so now we start to talk about the differences between the two. And really where those differences come into play are programming costs. And so I am going to defer to my experts here in just a second. I'm just setting the table. But from a programming perspective, obviously there's two different sort of animals here because the senior center has a very specific set of programming, whereas the community center is going to have a much broader set of programming depending on what's in it. And so we need to start having that discussion this evening. And candidly, one of the main things we would like to try and get some consensus on, we don't need a final answer, but some consensus on, because it will then lead into the cost discussion, is what is the vision for how this operates? Is it 5 days a week? Is it 6 days a week? Is it 7 days a week? Is it 8 hours a day? Is it 12 hours a day, right? That is going to dictate both programming scope in either scenario, and it is going to dictate cost, which we will start to get into a little bit after we sort of have a programming discussion. And so at this point, I'm going to kick it over to our very able Parks and Rec Director, Courtney Wazinski.
I can use this mouse over there. once I-
Yes, you can. You can pick that up and take it with you. And the keyboard.
Excellent. Hello, Task Force. I will start with the input session that Progressive had held for the public. I think it went really well. People were trickling in throughout the meeting, but I would say we had approximately 30 people there. And of those 30, there was probably 18 faces I hadn't seen up till now. So I thought that was great that the community is hearing and they're coming and they're having input. So the way Progressive set it up was similar to our previous listening sessions where there was boards up and what an architect calls programming versus what a Parks and Rec person calls programming are very different. But their program, what it does is lays out all of the rooms and or the space with the square footage and what that space might have in an activity. So they're looking at it from a building perspective. They had brought the previous concept plan and explained that to the audience, that this is the previous concept plan from the Yonkers expedition, we'll call it. But it was a very good starting spot because there's many things in there that we had gotten input from our senior center members as well as some other public that had been incorporated till now. So that was somewhat confusing that some folks felt that maybe we already had a plan, but we tried to reiterate that was the previous plan. We're just using that as a foundation for today. So then it was interactive, and we had a lot of input from the crowd, which I thought was fantastic. Used sticky notes, put them in separate places, kind of like a brainstorming session. Some of the comments are similar to what we've heard up till to date, but there's a lot of other comments as well. So I know Progressive's putting together all of that in a summary, but overall, I think it was a really, really well-attended and informational session. So I don't know if the task force has any specific questions about that meeting.
Member Vagnozzi?
Not specifically that meeting, but can you shrink this a little bit because it's cutting off?
Yeah, when I get to it, I will.
Okay, we get to it.
Any questions about the meeting on the 4th? Were there any big ticket new items that were being requested that we hadn't heard before?
I wouldn't say big ticket. We did have some representatives from our pickleball community. And so they gave some input on if we were to think about pickleball, how we might look at that and make sure that we're installing pickleball courts that would be easily used. And they've got some great ideas. Other than that, I wouldn't say there's any big ticket items. There was some support of a community center from some of the new faces I had seen as well.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I see that many of them were community centers, but those community centers also offered senior.
Oh, I'm not here yet.
Oh,
Sorry, I'm just going over that meeting. Yeah, so I will
okay,
go through
got
this,
it.
yeah. I know I shouldn't have put it up there because we all want to see, we all want to read it, right? Yeah, I'll get right to that, Luann.
all right.
There, now it's gone.
No, it's fine.
There, now
Now it's gone.
I'll reduce it, Steve, a little.
Okay,
It's chopping off column L.
just a little bit.
And of course, I can't see.
So something for the IT of the future, a monitor on the podium. So that it can,
Looked into it.
yeah,
Yep.
there we go.
Good.
Perfect.
Good.
One more level and we should,
No, that's fine.
Okay. Everyone can see this?
well, we can, but they can't now.
So,
They relocate.
yeah, maybe if over there,
Can you,
or,
maybe not.
can we just cut it off at column M? And that'll get it a little bigger.
Perfect.
There we go.
Back to the same spot.
excellent. So what we've done here is wanted to reach out to other community centers, other senior centers, other community centers with senior programming and kind of see, what types of, as interim manager Schmidt said, we need to kind of figure out how many days per week, how many hours, and kind of wanted to see what other people around the area and other outside of our area that we know have really successful programs. So the list here, you can see in green is community center, but all of these community centers have at least senior programming. Some of them have an actual standalone senior center, or at least designated senior center within their community center. The blue here are just senior centers, so see around the area here. And then there's a little caveat up there with that blue EL Prime Time. So East Lansing Prime Time Senior Center is located within the East Lansing Hannah Community Center, but it's kind of standalone, like they operate on their own. So I wanted to pull it out a little bit so we could kind of see that piece itself. I can say that our current senior center manager, Sherry Wisdom, works closely with Alicia, the manager at East Lansing Primetime too. So they're in great contact. So I'll kind of walk you through the columns here. We've got our site name, designated senior center, community center. The little star is what you can't see, but that includes senior programming. Then we have building square footage, and I want to make a big caveat here. I didn't get response from all of the directors to date, so some of these building square footage are based off aerial imagery. So take this with a grain of salt. There are some that I did get to confirm, but with a grain of salt, these are very broad numbers, if you will. And then we have how many days?
Director Wazinski, if you
Director
hang on one
Wazinski,
moment.
I have just a quick question. On Williamson Senior Center, is that based on the older senior center or the new one?
That would be the new one,
It is the new one?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
yes.
I guess I have to add
Yes,
something
no,
to
that
that, having been there last Saturday. That's not accurate, that figure.
Which figure?
6,000 square feet for Williamson Senior Center.
Do you know what it is? I can certainly update it.
I thought it was.
I don't know for sure, but a gentleman I was talking to Saturday, I thought it was closer to 8,500. But
Okay.
That's just why I was asking.
I didn't get a response from
I
them.
don't know
Yeah.
for a fact.
Yeah,
Is that your-
8,500
That's about right.
Okay,
Okay.
was what I heard.
excellent. I will make sure to update that. And as I get responses from the directors, I didn't give them a whole lot of time. So once I get them, I will continuously update this as well. So we're in column number 4, number of days per week that they're open, and then number of hours they're open per day. The days of the week are variable, so it can be seasonal, it can be circumstantial, COVID or something like that as well. So those can be variable. And then the number of hours open per day is variable, because if they're open 7 days a week, usually Saturday and Sunday are reduced hours or something like that. So again, take this with a grain of salt, because it was hard to aggregate all this varying data. Then I've listed here what the hours they are open generally. Staffing, I'm still looking into, but the staffing that we have, that we know that those community centers use. Annual membership cost.
Sorry, what are all the asterisks in that column?
Yeah, so that's at the bottom here. I was gonna go through each one, and that, I think that might help keep it.
Yeah, member Steve.
Yeah. On staffing, is that paid staffing only, or does it include volunteer staffing?
From the ones that are here, that's all paid staffing.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Annual membership cost, I don't know how important that is, but it's variable, but you can see, with the exception of Farmington Hills Hawk Center, which is like the Taj Mahal of any community center, probably anywhere, they're all right around anywhere between $15 and $25. And then annual operating costs here. The only person I had gotten a chance to talk to was East Lansing, so I'll walk through that one too. So we'll start with Osceola County, the staffing, the asterisks there, the staffing. I'd put there that's 1 director, 4 patron support, 3 rec programmers, and 2 youth services. And the reason I did that is because that's not the same language that we are currently using. So not knowing what all exactly those roles and responsibilities for each of those are, I just wanted to make it a caveat, and I can look further into it.
Member Bagnosi.
Can you clarify for the public, Osceola, what city would people commonly recognize for Osceola County?
Yeah, it's actually Osceola Township, and it's City of Howell.
Howell.
Oh, okay, near Howell. Okay, so it's in Livingston County.
Correct.
Okay,
This is one of the ones that the previous task force visited, I think, right?
That's accurate,
Yeah.
yep. And so is Portage,
Okay,
which is the next one on the list too.
got it.
8,400 square feet.
I'm sorry.
8,400 square feet is what I'm
Oh,
saying.
good job. Thank you.
8,425.
We need to be exact. We like to be. So looking at this, let's see, down at East Lansing, there's asterisks there too. That one is very complex. East Lansing Hannah Center offers things that not many other community centers do. For example, theater, they have entire dance program. So there's staff there that, unless we were to decide, but we haven't had a talk about a theater or a pool, then it's, I don't know how applicable it is. However, I did speak with the director, and she said once we get closer, she can walk us through all of that if that's helpful for us, so we can do that, get a deeper dive.
And just so we've said it, every version of this discussion that we've ever had has said no pools.
It's what?
Has said no pools. As
No
much as it-
pools.
As much as it may
And I
be.
haven't heard of a theater, so
Right,
absolutely.
as much as it has been, something that I know that a number of people have asked about, the cost is astronomical. And so that may be something we can just X off the list early.
Yeah.
Sorry, Member Bagnosi.
one of the other unique things about East Lansing Hannah Center is it's an old school. And basically, they inherited those items
Yeah.
that would probably not be there if they want, if that wasn't the model.
Yeah, I mean, Farmington has pools, and so some community centers do, but yeah, absolutely, Supervisor Hendrickson, clear, no pool. And I would agree. So walking through this, where's our other, so with our Meridian Senior Center, I have an annual operating cost of $150,000. That's just staffing and some operating costs. Because it sits in school, in Chippewa Middle School, the school takes care of a lot of that other operating cost, heating, cooling, maintenance. So that's not, I wanted to put that on there, but it's not terribly representative of what it would cost. For East Lansing, for operating costs, they break it into what would be building or facility structural versus what they call guest services, which would be everything it takes to register folks or front desk folks and what that would take in an operating cost, probably offices and IT and things like that. So she broke them out that way. For the building itself, it's almost $1 million, just operating costs for the building. It's a large building at almost 71,000 square feet. That doesn't include the 3rd floor because it's not being used at this point. And then another $600,000 for the other parts of the operating costs, which would be the personnel and and that associated. So I'm going to skip to, I kind of summarized it. First, is there any questions on this? I summarized it so it kind of makes a little more applicable sense.
Task force members, any questions? Oh, we kind of did these in real time here, so.
And this is the whole group that we'll be looking at tonight?
This is what, yes, this is.
Okay, it's not like there's another screen of a whole bunch more.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'll go to the microphone.
You're okay.
And I'm more than willing to look at more. So I kind of did a radius from our area and then kind of pulled some of the other folks that we know have new and/or great community centers or senior centers. So here,
Okay.
what I've done is I've pulled out senior center only and senior and community center, which would be that community center on the other page that has senior programming. For the average size of the ones we saw on the other page, and these are average and they're not, all of those are subject to correction, but average size for a senior center only was about 5,800, seems appropriate. And then the average size for a senior community center is about 40,000, which is kind of spot on where we have been thinking. For senior center only, average days per week, they're generally Monday through Friday. And then senior and community center, there's many that are open 7, but there's some that are only open 5 as well, so kind of average right around 6. Here's where the big difference is. Senior center only is similar to our current senior center at about 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. But community center is 6 to 7 days a week at 12 hours a day. Average opening time makes sense. Senior center is about 8 a.m. The community center opens much earlier so they can accommodate folks that are still going to work during the day hours. And then, of course, they're open a lot longer at night, generally close at 4 for a senior center. On average, almost all of the other community centers closed around 9. However, they do stay open for special events and things like this. This would just be operating hours. And then average number of staff is pending. I plan to populate that and I can distribute once I get the directors to kind of come back with some of the numbers. So that's kind of what I did here, just so we can have some idea, but to the interim manager's Schmidt's point is this is going to make a difference in the cost. So existing staff versus what it's going to take, how much staff it's going to take to accommodate a 7-day week or 6 or 7-day week in a 12-hour day. So just kind of want to put that out there, and I don't know if this is helpful, if you want more information or how I can maybe get more specifics for you.
Any questions? Member Steve?
Yeah. I think one of the things I'd be interested in knowing is what the traffic is like on those different days of the week.
Okay.
For example, is Saturday a very heavy traffic day for the senior and community centers, or is it lighter?
That's a great question. I can speak a little to that when I'm speaking with Director DeChambeau, this East Lansing Hannah Center. As she had indicated in the summer, they don't open on Sundays because a lot of people are gone. You know, East Lansing kind of goes back to a relatively calm community, so it does vary, but
Yeah.
I think we could get a pattern, no doubt.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, the 5-day senior center only makes total sense. I think if you're going to go with a senior and community center, you probably, I would imagine that what we'll find if we look into it is that 6th day, the Saturday, is probably the most well-trafficked of any time.
Yeah.
And that traffic for the community center area will be slow throughout the day and then pick up into the evening. That would be my guess, just based on what I understand of, human behavior. Not to say that you don't have people interested in using the community center throughout the day. I mean, for groups and events and meetings and whatnot, I'm sure there's plenty of call for daytime hours for the community center portion. But it seems to me that you'd likely see your most highly trafficked time on the weekend and in the evenings, with some also using it during the day. Senator Robertson.
Thank you. To your point on that, is there a way for us to not only see the day usage report, but also a intraday?
By time.
Yeah. To your point of like 6 to 9 a.m. is the busiest, and then it's 6 to 9 p.m. is the busiest, just to get an idea of hours for us potentially
I
as well.
can certainly ask, yep.
Yeah, one,
Senator Vagnozzi.
we have to be careful not to read too much into that, because just from my observations of being a patron of the Meridian Senior Center, scheduled events draw the largest crowd. So what you're gonna see is like the jazzercise, okay? You're gonna see that time slot on those 2 days. So it's not really a foolproof representation of what it would be if if you moved the hours of those, you'd see that blip move.
Sure. So grain of salt. Point well taken. Senator Maisner.
Right, and to Steve's point, when you look at programming, that's what's bringing people in. No one's coming to just to hang out. And so the more programming you have, the more people you have. So to say what's the busiest times and what's the chart of the unbusiest times really isn't going to tell us much, in all honesty. We know that in the fall and winter, the winter time was probably going to be Saturdays and Sundays where all the sports activities would take place. Maybe a little less during the week, but when there's programs, people are going to be there. And if there's space, I think we plan on programming that as much as we can.
Thank you. Member Steve.
Yeah, and I think too, it depends on, once again, this programming issue. Preschool activities, for example, would make a morning very busy if they have things for that toddler preschool crowd. And if they had after-school programming, that would make a difference there too. So I think getting an idea, but it would be nice to know if they have a programming, is there demand? And that's where I'd be interested in seeing that.
And it was variable, like I was looking at different programs that some do offer before care, some offer drop-in after care, some, so there's things that some offer and others don't. But I can look at the data and see if we can't see some sort of pattern or.
Just an idea.
Other questions or thoughts? All right.
Excellent.
Carry on.
Thank you so much. Please let me know if you have, send me an email if you have other questions after tonight.
Thank you.
So blending into that now, Deputy Manager Opsmer is going to talk a little bit about costs, especially given that we went through a fairly extensive process with the Yonkers building. And we're not going to get into all those details right now, but we want to sort of give you a background of the things that we're thinking about as we move forward with these decisions, because again, the idea of hours of operation and size of facility and days of the week are going to drive these numbers as well. And so really just any feedback that we can get on the thoughts of hours and days would be beneficial as we move forward.
So somewhat similar, but a little bit different for the costs associated with maintaining and operating the facility. So we're thinking gas, electric, water, sewer, elevator inspections, if there were elevators, everything, all the components that go into the building. In terms of those costs, what we came up with roughly per square foot at the Yonkers site was about a little over $26 per square foot. We're putting together a new model where we'll be able to kind of give you an idea fairly quickly on what the cost would be for a senior-only center at varying square footages versus a senior and community center at varying square footages. But obviously, the utilities are going to be directly related to the square footage. So every additional square foot you add, you're presumably adding fixtures that will use water, you're adding square footage that needs to be heated and cooled, et cetera. We're also adding more linear feet of ductwork, et cetera. So think about, and we'll bring back some numbers in January so you can really look at this, but generally speaking, look at about $26 per square foot. It's probably going to come down from that now that we're talking new construction, because we won't have older elevators. We had 2 elevator shafts in the Yonkers building. presumably, we may have no elevator shafts in this building. We had a flat roof on the Yonkers building. We could do a pitched roof with a metal roof for the new construction of this, which, we might be able to realize a 100-year lifespan for a new metal pitched roof, for instance. We would have new parking lots built to the standards that we spec out versus having parking lots that would need to be resurfaced at some point during the first 20 years that the facility's opened. So those are the biggest drivers. So really square footage is going to drive a ton of that cost. And then we already have some ideas that we'll work with Progressive A&E on in terms of the design of the facility to minimize those costs to the greatest extent possible.
Member Vacnosi.
Can you clarify $26 per what time frame? Is that per year?
Per year.
Okay.
Yep. We're looking at annual operating costs of about $26 per square foot. That'll be a little bit conservatively high because that has, as Supervisor Hendrickson will remember, like the mall lease fee is built into that. I didn't back any of that out just to give us a nice conservative number. So I'm thinking the final numbers will vary in that $22 to $26 per square foot range.
And that's just operating year to year, not the build of the facility / purchase of the land and all that, if that's part of it.
I think that we had all the employees built into that one spreadsheet, so that kind of was totality.
Okay.
We can try to I could back out some of the employees really quick while we're in the meeting, and we could give you a cost. We could back out like the mall lease fee and some of the employees
Sorry.
that we had built into that model.
To your point, Supervisor Hendrickson, there's two questions here. There's like cost of construction estimate that we'll
Right.
need, and there's a cost of operations estimate that we'll need.
Yes.
Progressive will provide cost of construction estimate as we move forward.
Okay.
And is working on cost of operations.
Got it, okay.
My
Thank you.
apologies if I misunderstood. Yeah, we don't have any, we do actually have rough costs from Progressive A&E because we did have to get a replacement cost for the Yonkers site, and that was $397 per square foot. So that is the price per square foot for new construction,
What was that?
$397 per
Basically
square foot.
$400.
$400.
Yep. Operating annually, think $22 to $26 per square foot.
But just remember with that 400 square foot, you're attaching to an existing building. So functionally, that is not building one full exterior wall. So that $400 per square foot is artificially low because of that issue.
Sure. Yes.
Could we go back to the previous slide that we saw and look at the operating costs for East Lansing's Hannah Center for just a minute?
Came in at about 1.5 million, I think.
Combined.
For maintenance and programming.
Make it maintenance, that was my guess. Yeah, and so they're,
1.6.
yeah.
Member Steed, I missed your question, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to look at this.
Oh, okay.
Because just a little bit of quick mental math, they've got a 70,000 square foot facility, an old 71,000 square foot facility. And we're not coming in a whole lot lower on operating cost. I don't think. Are we? Am I not doing the math right?
Fuzzy, yeah.
Because if it was $20 a square foot, you're looking at $800,000 right there, right?
Yeah, well, a lot of that is going to be your salaries. And so
Okay,
salaries
so
don't
that's not just
factor-
heating, electrical, plumbing, all of that. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
So the $22
Oh, I
to
thought you were just talking
$26
Me
per
too.
square foot is all operations
All
costs from
operational. Okay,
employees, the
Okay.
IT supports that they need, their
Okay.
computers, down to paying the consumer electric and gas bill,
Insurance.
very
Insurance,
broad
all of
range. So
that.
some of those costs fluctuate per
Sure.
square foot, but some don't. I'm just
Yeah.
giving you a cost per square foot.
okay. I
So
thought
that
we
you
were-
all can kind of think about
Okay.
ramifications, the fiscal
Yeah.
ramifications of the decision-making that's before you.
That works for me then, thank you.
Thank you.
And may I add to that too, so, the two numbers up here
Right.
combined would be
Right.
what Dan's talking about,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Okay.
okay, yeah. And I thought we were talking building operations, not personnel, so thank you. Appreciate the clarification.
Got it. Other questions? Well, this is certainly interesting stuff to think about. I mean, we've got some important decisions to make in terms of, you know, some of the operating parameters, right? And, you know, I guess for me, the question would be like, what is going to be the financial difference really? I mean, there's some things won't change, right? The building's gonna have to be heated 7 days a week, whether we open it 7 days a week or not, right? We're gonna have electrical costs and water costs and whatnot. And so my question would be, from a staffing perspective then, you know, the building, you're gonna be size dependent in terms of that building operating costs. And then we've also got the staffing component and the personnel and programming operating costs that fluctuate as well. So my question, I guess, would be like, can we look at what it costs 7 days? You know, how many staff would we have to hire for 7 days a week operations at a reasonable amount for senior community center? What would it be for 6 days, 5 days, right? That's, at a certain point, it's just multiplying it by a percentage. And then from a, you know, sliding scale of building, you know, we've got a decent sense here. If it's $22 to $26, say, call it $25 a square foot, just for round math. We can multiply that by whatever square footage Progressive A&E tells us they think we should do, minus our sanity cuts. As, you know, as we kill dreams in the next couple of months here. And so, you know, that piece is relatively easy. You know, what I'd like to see is what's the price differential between days and the number of staff required and all of that. That'll give us a sense of sort of what we can, you know, the two levers we can squeeze and or not in order to make this a more cost-effective proposal. I mean, already, you know, having the size of it, if we're talking for even 450 square feet, $50 a square foot to build, plus these operating costs that you've laid out here, we're already $20 to $30 million less than we were talking about just a few months ago. And so, you know, what does that look like in terms of how we make our decision-making process from the operations perspective? Looking at the personnel, seeing what those numbers can actually be.
A clarifying question, Supervisor. Days per, like, number of days per week makes sense. Hours are gonna matter. So we could have 7 days a week at regular hours, because if you go outside of 8 hours,
Right.
then we need like a whole nother staffer, right? So I can try to put something together that,
So I
As a
think, I
matrix
mean,
is
based on, maybe, we'll open it up for a comment in a moment here, but it seems to me like the senior center would be basically 5 days, you know, 8 hours, right, for the operation, since that seems to be the operational norm for all the senior centers we see here. But then for the community center, feels like if you want to capture those groups, somewhere in the ballpark of maybe 6 days to start, from 7 to 9 would be a timeframe that would capture the most usage. Let's start there and then sort of accordion ourselves inward and outward.
Makes sense.
And that way we can get a baseline from those.
And there'll be certain, I'm certain that as we get into this, there are gonna be inflection points, right? If you go to 8 hours, it's this, but 8 to 13 is this, and then once you go above that, you bounce over to here. So I think we can probably build a model based off of those parameters, sort of a senior center model at 5 and 8, and a community center model at sort of 6 and then 14-ish, to see what it looks like.
I saw some nodding heads, but I do want to open up if there's any feedback on that suggestion before we have staff go hog wild on it. Anyone have any thoughts? Yes.
I actually have a question for Luann and Courtney, maybe. Because we're talking about hours, and that's one thing, but if it's primarily driven by programming activities, maybe the hours, not that they're not important, but maybe that's not it. So when I'm looking at this, it seems like whatever we do over and above what we're already doing, we're going to need additional staff people. And so that's, I think, one of the primary considerations before we start talking about too much is what are we able to incur over and above what we're doing now. And then maybe we need to build our programming into that box. Not absolutely, but I guess that was what was crossing my mind. Do you guys have any points on? how that would be run from an operation standpoint. Because the building is one thing, like Tim said, his building is construction, whatever square footage is, as long as it's flexible space. But programming is really.
I'll let Courtney start and then I will
Okay.
follow up.
However you're gonna do it.
Whatever she would.
I think I understand the question, Chair. Excuse me. So currently, our current senior center is well-programmed, and we have great stats on it. So we know what's happening, when those things are happening, how many days a week, how many people attended. So I think with a current senior center, we would be able to add more depending on what more building we have. Like, are we gonna add a multi-use room just to the senior center? Those would be, this is where it goes, the chicken and the egg, right? Programming in other community centers and other programming that I think we know that would be well attended here in Meridian. So I could put something together there, but it's gonna be difficult if I don't know what type of facility we're gonna have. I don't know, Lou, if you had.
No, that's true. I look at our current staffing and, 600 children playing soccer, another 600 playing baseball and flag football, and then to throw on all the programming for the center. We definitely were going, I'm thinking of full-time versus, part-time, or people just to work the counter. I know currently even at the senior center and prior to that, when we would offer yoga classes, we would just have an instructor. So it'd be like a contractual instructor come in for that. So it's not anything that's really adding to like a full-time staffing thing with benefits. But I'm guessing we would need at least one person to coordinate and run. So we would be adding at least one more full-time person, if not two, just for programming. But then the rest would be, it could be anybody just, wanting some part-time work here and there. So I don't, I guess we need to look, and then it kind of depends, what type of facilities we have and the type of programming that we get into. When we look at preschool activities, that's like daycare, be certified, and licensed facility for that. And of course, it sounds good, but I can tell you, when you talk about a need, and we have Sporties for Shorties that everyone's heard about, and it's for 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. I think if we offered 2-year-old programs, we get calls for, I've got a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, everybody wants to get their children into something. And so there's a huge niche for that really young toddler, preschool age programming. So, it really depends. The programming kind of depends on the staffing that we have, and it doesn't necessarily need to be full-time staffing, but we will be having a series of part-timers coming through. How you calculate that at this point, I'm not exactly sure.
Not to mention, you'll keep Mike Devlin busy well through the winter with indoor Sporties for Shorties.
Right, yeah.
You'll have to find.
We'll need a new events coordinator.
They will be there and running things too, but I'm just saying that there's.
No, I'm
Yeah.
just teasing, yeah. Remember, Steve?
Well, and there's a big difference between programming for preschoolers and childcare. And so I think just the programming part of that would be a pretty big demand. I know I looked all over the place for something to do indoors when I had a 3-year-old. And, it's usually you take them to the mall or over to Impression 5 where they can run their legs off in some designated spot. So, yeah, every desperate parent.
Perfect.
I guess that's what I was looking at from a park commission standpoint, knowing how much our staff already does. And even if we stayed strictly within the senior center as it is, I'm believing that when we do something new, we are going to be looking for more people to come to the senior center.
Yes.
Because I think based on the numbers I've seen and my familiarity with who's using the senior center and who's not using the senior center, we have an opportunity here to really capitalize on that. That to me means more staff. We cannot do that. So I just want to make sure as we're starting down this discussion, because we'll handle building cost. I mean, that's kind of cut and dried through progressive and whatever that turns out to be. But from a staffing standpoint, I think that's a really important consideration before we get too, so it's like you said, we don't want to be killing dreams, but at the same time, some of these things, we also have to be physically responsible and, where that is. But I just want to make sure we put staffing out there because I don't see us doing it with our current staff at all.
So, and
I don't think that scenario is likely in any way because,
Yeah.
even if it's just a senior center, we need to have a senior center coordinator on board. We don't have one right now. The current senior center does, but that's a Okemos Public School staffer. So I think under any scenario, there is gonna be a model built for what level of staffing we need to bring on, and how does that get absorbed into the financial model?
And I will point out that the $26 a square foot that was calculated for the Yonkers facility did include, I think, a couple of new Parks Department staff, did it not, for the operations of the building as well? for
It did,
programming?
it did. It was, I believe,
Dan's escaped.
it was 4 to 5 more staff, considering it was going to be open on weekends and early and late.
Yeah.
We had,
So-
it was 2 programmers, 2 receptionists, I believe, and at least 2, or no, we built 4 back at house and.
2 utilities.
So I
Utilities.
think a total of 8 employees across multiple funds to run that facility.
So that was baked into that $26 a square foot with the Yonkers facility. Yes.
At some point, not now, but at some point, it would be helpful to me to have a little more information on how we're gonna pay for it. Just some little discussion about that.
Yeah.
What are our options? What are we looking at in terms of existing funds, earmarked funds, grants, those things, and, millage, all of that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a big one.
I agree,
Other decisions.
with the caveat that we need to narrow down or solidify what it is we're trying to do before, for example, just for argument's sake, if we look at a 10,000 square foot senior center, then you got one set of costs. If you look at a 40,000 square foot combined, you got another. So I think it needs to happen, but I don't think we've tightened things down enough where would do anything but cause unnecessary panic.
Sure. And we have always been committed to exploring all manner of funding options
Yeah.
in order to make this happen, especially for the senior center.
But there
have to do.
was a dollar amount that was deemed too much.
Yeah.
Yonkers was deemed as
The board.
Too
the
high a
board-
cost.
Yes, the board had concerns about the cost of that facility. That was
Okay.
78 million, I want to say, somewhere in that ballpark for building and operations over 20 years.
Yeah, it was somewhere
Yeah.
around 75, 78
Yeah,
million.
it was something like that. So at least we know
Yeah,
it can't be that much.
that's right. So that's helpful.
Right.
It's
So
helpful to know where, because if we can only afford this much,
Right.
let's not spend a whole lot of time
Yeah.
on this.
So it's,
Yeah.
I think what we know right now is we have a $5 million grant from the state. We have some undetermined amount that we are hoping we will get from the federal, a federal appropriation that Congressman Slotkin was able to push forward. We'll see in the coming months how that fares. We have money in our capital projects fund, and we are committed also to going out and trying to solicit major donors for
Sure.
things like naming rights and that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so it's our hope that we can turn that into, a sizable chunk of change.
Yeah, but we
Once
still
you
have
get-
that operating cost. And I think I'm more interested in that operating cost more than I'm concerned about the brick and mortar
Agreed.
cost.
Well, and that money could be amortized over time too, so, we're cognizant of that. But, we have a senior, I can't remember what the name of the millage is called. It's the community services.
Community services village.
Yeah.
And that pays for the $150,000 operating costs that we spend on the 2 salaries that we pay for currently. But no matter what we do, I think that's an interesting point that came up earlier today. No matter what we do, we've got more costs in any scenario moving forward because we don't pay for the facilities currently.
Yeah.
So no matter what we do, we're paying more than we did yesterday. as soon as we open a new facility. And so, at a certain point, there's gonna be a conversation about, this is the dollar threshold we think we can get to, both to construct and to operate. And anything beyond that, we may have to put it forward to the voters to consider. And so,
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
but that's absolutely a conversation we need to have.
Yeah, but not today, but yeah.
Right,
just-
yeah, once we have some bigger numbers, and we can look at the balance sheet on both sides and say, this is what we think we have, this is what we think we need, how do we connect those dots? Other questions? No, Robertson.
I had a question regarding the annual membership cost, just because I didn't know it was $25 for the senior center here. Is that number of 25, is that tied to a specific metric of some kind, or is that just kind of decided upon and periodically changed or increased?
Historically, I'll let Lou speak to that, but it hasn't changed this year, and I don't expect it to change, and it can be reduced and based on need, things like that. But historically, Lou, has it changed much?
There's been a membership fee, far as I know, forever. And it's basically been to cover mailing costs and printing costs for the brochure that has been put together and the mailing costs. And that's basically what it has covered, and really nothing else. There's people here from the senior center, but there's programs that they pay to participate in as well. So it's not like everything that's offered is free. There's a fee to many of the things that they do there.
Got it, okay, that's helpful.
But it's really just to
Massage,
cover
reflexology.
the postage and the printing of a brochure.
Jazzercise?
Jazzercise, I believe, is a part of, no, it might have an extra cost.
That has not, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they have an instructor that comes in, and then they have an operating fee that they work with, or a little budget to help pay for those things.
Thinking of this annual fee from the perspective of if we had a community center and that potentially maybe being a double or triple effect of people using the facility, which would be a double or triple effect of revenue. I mean, it's still smaller dollars, but I was just curious if that was trying to cover something, or if it's trying to cover a salary, or how that all kind of computed, so.
Yeah. I imagine, and we haven't talked about all the revenue that would be generated from building rentals, from program activity, participation costs. So we never even dove into that one quite yet, so.
Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, this is an asset too from that perspective.
Yeah.
When, in the original iteration, we had anticipated that, the multipurpose, auditorium space could be rented out for lectures, for community events, for wedding receptions, for any number of things that would generate some amount of revenue.
Our model has been to be as self-sufficient as possible in Parks and Recreation. And so our fees and charges for all of our programs and activities were set up to cover all the direct costs. Not necessarily all of the rest of the overhead and salaries, but all the direct costs for the programs.
Good to know.
And so we've been able to, not be a drain on the general fund at all, and still keep the operations going and the costs low.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Other questions? Well, I think this was always going to be sort of a set the table meeting.
Boosh.
Yes, to get us comfortable with the idea of thinking about and talking about the money aspect of it. We will break for the holidays and for the end of the year here, and come back ready to talk cash after the first of the year. So I appreciate everyone's weighing in and providing some good insight on our initial discussion. And I think we've given our team lots of homework, lots of math homework to go do. And we'll be back whenever. When is that?
January 28th.
Everyone, see, everyone together. No.
I'm so excited to be here.
And just so everyone is aware, that is Progressive will likely be here that evening. I need to confirm the specifics of that with sort of an initial readout. And then the thought being in February, we're going to, at least on the current schedule, have a pretty good concept of everything to get final feedback so that we can give you hard, detailed information, essentially 2 hard models at the March meeting, which has always been the plan.
Okay, Member Vagnozzi.
I guess I'd like a clarification of senior center alone. I understand what it is. But in terms of the combined senior center and community center, I really would like to be able to look at a phased option.
So to be clear, we've said this all along, any scenario will be able to be phased, right? If we bring, the model for the senior only is going to be a design that allows us to phase in a community center going forward. That's realistically the only thing we can bring is sort of either a 1 and a 2 or a 1-2 off the top. Because building two completely separate buildings and completely separate HVAC, completely separate water, and, it's just completely inefficient.
Yeah, I'm trying to clarify that. Just because of the trends of inflation, if you built everything at one point in time, it will most likely cost less than if you build half and then half 2 years later.
Under most scenarios, yes, I would agree.
Okay. So, well, I want to make sure we don't lose the costing for a phased approach. That's as clear as I can be.
And I think
I want to make sure we don't lose the ability to be able to cost in a phased approach.
we will bring a model that is a senior center only with a cost model, and we will bring a concept that is senior community center with a cost model.
Okay.
There's no, that is the charge we've been given, and our point simply is that it's not going to be two separate buildings. That is not a realistic way for us to approach this problem.
No, and I'm not looking at two separate buildings. What I was looking at is
Build a senior center.
Build senior
and
center
then 10
first.
years down the road,
it
build,
didn't have to be 10
Well,
years,
whatever.
whatever, some later date.
right, X years down the road.
Right.
Extend it into
Right.
a more,
And my rationale for doing that is because we have a drop dead date on the senior center that we don't have on the community center.
Sure.
So I don't want to get us trapped where we don't have time to get the senior center.
We have a drop dead date for a community/senior center, one or the other.
Yeah.
It's not just the senior center drop dead date. It's one, the 5 million isn't senior center only.
right. So,
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Just at the risk of being vulnerable with this, I would say when you look at the township's goals of what we'd like to accomplish for our community, you look at the usage of the senior center currently, hopefully that triples when we move into a new space, absolutely. But then looking at the other tens of thousands of the population in Meridian Township who could then utilize it. Steve, I like your logic of building something all at once versus staggering it because of that cost potential going up.
Yeah.
So I think that.
If we can fund it.
right.
Correct. I think that community cohesion is a nice goal to have for this project, from my perspective, kind of where I'm looking at this from.
All right. So actually, I was gonna ask on behalf of our resident here, because I think it was Julie had asked about a standalone building for the senior center. If we are to go forward with a senior center option, it would be standalone. If we were to move forward in any world with a senior and community center, the efficiencies gained would basically necessitate, the efficiencies from a cost perspective, would essentially necessitate it being a single facility.
Yeah.
Now, it can be cordoned off or sectioned off or whatever, however we want on the inside, but for the sake of building an actual building, it would have to be one building.
One building envelope. for
Correct.
example.
One outside, set of walls, and
Right.
whatever happens on the inside happens. The last thing I'll note, it's not on our agenda, but we have made a commitment, so I want to make sure we honor it. We do have our next check-in with the township board on January 7th. And so I'm hoping that we can get a couple of volunteers to come to our January 7th meeting to give an update on behalf of the task force to the board. Would anyone be able to do that?
I thought we decided that last meeting for some reason. Was that a different check-in?
They already did one.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the November 12th check-in.
I do that one? Well, I have to check our schedule. We haven't set our plan, our park commission schedule yet, so there's a potential for a conflict.
We can certainly follow up with an email here shortly.
Yeah.
Have everybody check their calendars and
Yeah.
I'll rope two of you in one way or the other.
Thank you.
I will be out of town for that 7th meeting, unfortunately.
Maybe not for you.
Oh, did you say January or February?
January
Oh, yeah, I'll be here in February.
Yeah.
Well, we'll keep you in mind for the February.
Yes, definitely put me down for February.
I didn't know if it was
We can't
some, there's
zoom
some
in, can
helpful
we?
help in being consistent with who was representing for the board or.
Yeah.
I mean, my initial thought had been to rotate it so as not to
Okay.
put one person in charge of
Okay.
being that spokesperson. And I had also bowed out of giving that update myself since I sit on the board. Trying to not be that messenger.
I can do January 7th.
You can?
Yes, I just checked my calendar, okay?
Thank you very much.
Staff, I think, normally prepares everything for you.
We don't in this case. This is entirely prepared by the members.
Okay.
Yeah.
We want the members to be reporting out what they're doing.
All right.
And if, we will follow up with trying to get a backup just in case, because Member Robertson was able to handle the first one. It would just be good to have a second available.
All right.
All right.
Is it January 7th or 27th?
January 7th.
7th.
Yep. First thing.
We'll know soon.
All right. With that said, we'll go on to public remarks, and it seems our public has left us. Member Mazur, do you have something you want to add?
I do. I'd like to thank staff for putting together that whole chart of what's going on in the nearby senior community centers. That was very helpful today. I think really made our whole meeting very fruitful.
Yeah.
Thanks for the effort on that.
Agreed. And,
I have a great team of directors.
Yeah. Yeah.
and not just on this, there's so much that goes into making these meetings happen. And I know it's something we sort of piled on without a whole lot of notice. And so I thank you all for being here and giving up yet another Tuesday evening, and all the time that goes into that. So thank you. That's a good reminder, especially at a time when we're meant to be thankful. And so
Thank you.
I just had a quick
Yes, Heather.
comment for those that went to the Williamston Senior Center. If we could just get a donation like that building, that would be great.
Yeah, right. It was so much easier.
It was.
Just as a note, though, the fundraising heart in me, we took quick pictures of all the donors
Oh, good.
to that, so I have that information.
We know who to call.
Most of them were from Meridian Township. So,
Really?
yes.
There, just one interesting observation. Okay, I can't remember which of the presentations by a consultant it was, but they talked about one of the issues about clarity of being able to hear people. And they've already discovered that that's an issue with them, because it has those great big vaulted ceilings. I mean, and they're already realizing that it causes an issue. And then the second one, I shared pictures. Okay, they have a huge kitchen. Okay, but it's really overkill for. But again, that's when you take an existing building, you have trade-offs that you don't with a clean sheet.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank you. Anything else for the good of the cause? Seeing none, the last item on our agenda is adjournment. Any motions to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Member Robertson. Wait a second. Supported by Member Maisner. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned at 7:09 PM.